Okay. So can everybody see my screen? Is that okay?
Are we good?
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. So thank you and welcome. This is our second budget subcommittee meeting of the year. And I just wanted to provide an update of where we are, what we're looking at, and some very preliminary numbers as far as staffing and what we're looking for expenditures for next year. If you guys have any questions during the process, just please jump in and go ahead. So the purpose is we're just going to provide an update, like I just said. I'd like direction on more information if you want it, if you think that'd be better for the board as we go, and then just kind of whatever questions you may have. Our goals, as we've talked about and as we discussed back in November, we started with equity, and that's every student, regardless of learning ability or socioeconomic status, has access to the services they need to succeed. That one is universal for us. And then there's staffing. We'll always provide the staffing that our students need to be successful. And then curricular support and facilities. And before I go any further, I apologize. I did not introduce Jenny Jenkins, our Director of Finance, and Cynthia Vaughn. She is our budget analyst, and they are instrumental in this process as well. So I wanted to make sure that I thanked them. And so those are our goals, similar to last year, but we changed the priority of them. And so we do have some major revenue assumptions. This is a non-reassessment year. And actually that's 2022 is the fall when that is reassessed. So 2022 is a non-reassessment year, but those taxes always play into the 2023 budget. So the projection for an increase in assessed valuation is anywhere in that $2 to $3 million for local revenue. We see it historically between 2 and 2.5, and we may try to recoup a little bit of money that was, if your assessed valuation is final in the fall when you set your tax rate. And then as the fall goes on, they reevaluate and see if that drops, you can recoup some lost revenue. And so we're looking into that. So that might add just a little bit to it. So again, non-reassessment year, so we won't see that huge increase that we normally do. DESE's indicated that the foundation formula will be fully funded, but there won't be any increase to that. Prop C, as you guys all know right now, the sales tax revenue is strong in the state of Missouri, so we'll see an increase in that. And then transportation will not increase, and my, I guess, soapbox, it'll remain woefully underfunded. And so until we can really get into that transportation, it's going to be and remain underfunded. We were kind of hoping that the state, with some of the surplus revenue this spring, would increase that, but they have said that they would not at this point. Investment earnings are increasing slightly, but not to pre-pandemic levels. And then, as we've talked about a couple times, our Medicaid revenues due to cost settlement will increase in the range of about $4 to $5 million. So this brings us to the next sheet here. As you can see, we are predicting a little bit of a decrease in revenue, and that's due to Blankenship. We received our second to last tax payment this morning. We're about $1 million more than where we were last year, but with it being a reassessment year this year, we should be a little bit higher than that. So we'll have to see. The payments were off this year with timing of sending out the bills by the state. So the personal property tax bills, and they've been slow, they've been delayed. So this last payment should have come out last week. It came out this morning. So we'll have one more in the early part of February. But as we get that, we'll really be able to tell you what Blankenship looks like and how that impacted us. So right now we're still a $1.6 million up on where we were at this point last year. That could change with that last payment, or it could increase. So we'll have a better idea when that comes out, and that should come out probably the 4th or 5th of February. But as you can see, total revenue by source, our local revenue, we're looking to decrease. County revenue, that stays pretty similar, so we're going to keep that the same. State revenue, we've put an increase in there for personal property. Federal, we've just given it a slight increase, remaining similar at this point. And then our contracted and services, and other revenue, we generally keep that flat at that 68 or $6.8 million. So you can see with the increase in Medicaid and the increase in personal property, that while we are seeing a decrease, it won't be that 15 or 16 million that we were talking about for this year because of Blankenship. Any questions about the revenue?
I have a quick question about the transportation you were saying is woefully underfunded. Do you mean our budget for transportation? I'm assuming no, that this is something else.
No, that's a great question. I made it sound doomsday, didn't I? Our budget for transportation is fine. We're actually up a little bit on our transportation revenue than where we thought we would be. When I say it's woefully underfunded, the state is supposed to fund it at 75%. They fund it right around that 25 to 30%. So they're not, over time, they have neglected to keep the revenue to fund transportation at the levels they should. And so we were hoping to see a bump in that this year with the surplus that the state has, but the way they're talking is they're not going to increase that transportation funding.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, so our predictions for what we need and what we budgeted are good. It's just the state continues to not fund that where they should. As we've talked about, there's a focus on all, focus on some, and a focus on a few. We've talked about that. The all is all our partner districts. The sum is our disproportionate districts, and then the few are those in those distressed. There's 8 districts in the higher distressed community that we've worked on throughout this. One of those areas, that some area, is disproportionate. And I want to show you kind of how we break that down. Here, let me do this. This might make it bigger. Does that make it better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so what we're looking at here is this. Well, we're looking at from our Part B money. That is money that the federal government and state says we will give you to fund special education. And so we receive $35–40 million a year with that. The state, because of the disproportionality, says we have to spend 15% on early intervention services, which means intervention services that either allow students not to be identified into special ed, where we get them the services they need prior to becoming or receiving an IEP, or the over-identification of African-American males who are suspended. And so what we set aside is $5.8 million each year to our 11 partner districts who receive DisPro funding. They can then either use that one of two ways. They can use it on staffing, which can serve students with special education needs, or it's really meant that they serve students on the front end prior to the IEP. And that can be through response to interventions. It can be social work. It can be getting kids with discipline issues help on the front end. Or districts can spend that DisPro money on training for teachers, programs. So I know Parkway has brought in a national speaker to work with them on different ideas and different ways to help students. So they can do that one of two ways. On this sheet here, on this grid, you'll see that if you just look at Ferg Floor, for example, up there, they have 1,728 students who receive special education services. That's 11.4% of this DisPro money that they'll receive, or a total of $601,000. With that, they decided, and this is last year, they decided to hire 1 instructional coach and 2 social workers. So that means they have a remaining amount of money of $331,000 to spend on programs. Or what they did is, these are the 3 that we hired. They have then hired more staff based on their needs, and they just bill us back. And so they stay within that budget. So they stay within that $601,000 budget. But you can see it's broken up per pupil. So Hazelwood has more students, so they receive more money. Rockwood, Parkway, the same boat. Some of our smaller districts down here, University City, you can see where they have 2 social workers, and there is a deficit of $62,000. We know we're going to have turnover, or we know we're going to have rollover money which is money out of that $5 million, $5.8 million that isn't spent. We also know that University City, and you'll see that with Jennings again this year, that's what that asterisk means, is that we're willing to spend a little bit more because they're tier 3. And so we're okay if we deficit spend a little bit on those accounts because we know we need to put the people there. And we know we've spoken with University City and Jennings, and that's where they need the money to be spent. So for example, with Jennings this year, they're asking for a couple instructional coaches. Well, an instructional coach is going to cost about $100,000. And so if we have 2, that will put them over budget by $100,000. We're okay with that. We know there's going to be rollover money, and we know that that position will do good things. Plus, it will also help support some of the programs, some of the supplies that they need right now as well. So on a couple of those schools, those tier 3 schools, we're willing to spend a little bit more. So that's kind of what you see with those asterisks. Normandy, we had 2 extra positions. They didn't get them hired this year. So we recognized that need last year. So we'll continue to work with them to hire into those positions that they need. Any questions on disproportionality?
Dr. Hogg, I've got a question about that. How can you explain how the district facilitates discussions of best practices as far as utilization of that money?
Yeah, so that is with our director in that district. It's with Chiquita McRiddle, it's with Tammy Yates, and they facilitate that discussion with not only our liaison in the partner district, but with their assistant superintendents, their directors of special education. So, and then they look at the data and they get into talking to and looking at the schools and seeing what they need. So in this case, we've looked a lot of, and we've even talked about this in our budget discussions. So we look at assessment data, we look at discipline data, and we look at how students with IEPs compare to students without IEPs. And so then they take that, and if there's students who have high suspension rates, we're going to get them the help they need, whether that's through an interventionist or a social worker. So to answer your question, that is with our partner, our district directors, our executive directors, and then our partner districts all collaborate with the schools to see what they need and what would best suit them.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and so as we look into, and we've already had numerous discussions with our partner districts. And so I'm going to skip out of this for 1 second because I think we missed a couple. We've not talked about expenditures yet, have we? No, I think those got skipped when I changed that slide. I apologize. So we're going to go back a couple slides here to major expenditure budget assumptions. And so we know that with salaries that were negotiated last year, we're not opening negotiations this year because we got into 2-year agreements with each union. We're going to see salary increases in 3.5 to 4% for that second year of negotiations. We'll monitor retirements and vacancies. Those will have impact on the budget. If you retire and you are in that upper echelon where you are at $95,000 a year, and we know that on average, a teacher that we bring in will look in the area of 52,000. So we know there's some savings there. So we'll monitor that savings based on retirements and vacancies and see fit. And a lot of that will look into, will there be enough in that to hire some more people? Where do we go with, where is that going to fall with our projections for next year? Can we hire more staff? How does that impact kids? And so that's why we constantly monitor retirements and vacancies. Everything we've talked to with our insurance groups right now, we're looking at probably around that 3% right now. It could go as high as 5%, but we kind of put in to play last year a little bit of a buffer. We didn't want to have to go up to a 5% right away. Last year with the pandemic, as you guys know, hospital visits, insurance rates were down, doctor visits. So there wasn't going to be too much of an increase. So we just imposed a little one on our own so that going into this year, we wouldn't have to make it a big one if that goes up. But really right now we're looking at, around that 3% range. We'll know more in the spring as some of our final numbers come in. Then the good thing is hospital usage is up. Doctor visits are up. And when we say that's a good thing, that means people are getting the treatment they need. They're able to get back into the doctor. And a lot of it is that preventative visit, not maintenance, that's not the right word, but preventative visits so that we can catch some of the things before they get into, bigger items. But we're good. We're glad that people are back into the doctor. We just know that's increasing at this point. Purchase services and supplies are on track with Ms. Potroff. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. For benefits, at one point we were talking about making benefits better, like more options and stuff. Are we still shopping for that? Have we decided that? Will that change the budget for it? How does that all work?
Yeah. So this past year, we were able to open up, instead of prior to this fall, we had one set of benefits. And it cost, let's just say $10,000 per person. So we were paying that regardless if people were using it to their fullest advantage or not. We were paying that per person. What we put in this fall was an HSA. And so it kind of gave people another option. It was a little bit cheaper than the original one. What we did, because your benefits go towards your retirement, if we would have paid, let's just say it's $8,000. The HSA is $8,000. We would have been shortchanging people $2,000 if they wanted to go with the HSA. So what we did is we pre-funded that HSA. And so we put that difference in. So we're still spending $10,000 per person, which is fine, but it's given people options. What it really did is it gave people an option. If my benefits are paid for by the district, but if my wife were on our benefits, I could have taken the HSA and it would have been cheaper. So we were able to get cheaper for families on that back end. And it was a little different coverage. What we're looking at for the spring are a couple different packages, a couple different options, a couple different levels. We don't know which ones we'll go with, but we're even looking at a kids option so that people do have that. When we went on electric for our electronic for signing up, it really provided us options. When we were paper pencil, we didn't have them. And so now that we're going out to bid in the spring for medical benefits, we've got that started that we do want to look into. And so Marsh McClellan, who is our broker, is looking into those extra benefits for us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And so we'll continue with purchase service and supplies. Our purchase services are up this year compared to last, but that's because we've been training. We've been allowing people to go to conferences. We've been bringing in different speakers. So we knew that would go up, but that's great because our people are being trained and that's all within budget. That's where a lot of our savings was last year in that purchase services. It was budgeted and then people just couldn't go anywhere because everything was either on Zoom or it didn't happen. And then again, as we just talked about, this is kind of anticlimactic now, we'll continue with our Dispro requirement at 15%. Or approximately $5 million. And so then as we look here, this just comes up. Okay. We know here are our big expenditures. There's 5 sections, total salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, and capital outlay. We know that we negotiated a 3% to 4% increase for both our certified and non-certified salaries. When we talk about certified, we're talking about teachers, administrators, and admin and CO. Anybody with a certificate. When we talk about non-certified, we're talking about paras, secretaries, bus drivers, our maintenance guys, anybody who is not certificated in that teaching realm. And so those are our 2 groups. And we know we contracted or negotiated, like I said, 3.5% to 4% with each group. So you'll see that increase here of $197 million to $204 million. We'll monitor that as we go, and that's where that retirement and resignations comes in. This is not adjusted yet. That 204 is not adjusted, and that 114 is not adjusted. Now, as we go through, we know we've had some we've had some openings in our paraprofessional pool to the tune of probably 175 throughout the year. If we look at that over 35,000 per, it's about $6 million. So we know as we've gone forward here, and we're going to project this out as we get more information coming in, but this budgeted of 111 will not be reached just because we're short 150 to 175. So we know probably as we go into next year, this 114 will be a little bit less based on the number of hires and people that we bring in. But we'll continue to monitor that. We'll continue to take a look and see what that means. I know we're looking to increase a couple different areas as we get into the spring and talk to a couple different groups. So total salaries, we have increasing by that 3.5%. Fringe benefits increasing by that 3% as well. Purchase services, we've kind of kept flat. Just we want to monitor those throughout the year and see if there's a couple areas we can cut. While when we do the zero-based budgeting, we know there's areas we can cut because there's areas that people aren't using anymore. But we know that's offset by new wishes, new requests. And so we're going to keep that flat for right now. We're going to keep these supplies. We know it's probably based on requests going to increase by about $400,000, $500,000 for what our schools want. And that's in the form of new books, new curriculum, new furniture. And so we know that that's going to increase. But I would imagine both of these will adjust a little bit as we go. And then our capital outlay, as we've discussed and in Mr. Clodfelter's presentation and Doug Austin's presentation, those are all the requests moving forward to meet those. One thing I did want to share, and we'll share with the entire board, is that, and Scott, you kind of brought this up and got us thinking quite a bit when we presented the 5-year plan for facilities, and we were looking at moving into doing central office next year. We started talking about playgrounds and some other things. There's nothing big that needs to be left in buildings or to be done in buildings, but we want to make sure we catch everything. So what we've done is we've flip-flopped year 4 and year 5, and we're moving back the renovation of central office for 2 reasons. One, we want to get into the buildings. We want to upgrade playgrounds. We want to make sure they're safe for students. We want to finish off hallways. We want to bring in new windows. We want to do what we can for students and buildings one last time before we do central office. The other is that we're starting our central garage next year. And those would be 2 major projects in the same year. And with construction costs the way they are, we didn't want 2 big projects the same year. So we know we can afford both of them, but we know we can afford central garage over the next 2 fiscal years. And we know we can afford everything we want to do in our buildings over the next 2 fiscal years. And then in that 5th fiscal year, we can then look at renovating central office. So those are all in that capital outlay column. So we expect anywhere in that $26,000. As you can see, FY20, we looked at 13 million of expenditures. 27 was budgeted. 15 the next year, 27 was budgeted. So we have 27 budgeted this year. We're going to spend more this year because of a couple of things. One, school's open. We're buying technology. We're building some schools. So our North Tech project finished up last year. South Tech will finish up this year. And then we have bridges. We had audiology. So we had $10 million at year end in that capital outlay fund. So as I shared with you guys in the fall. So that allowed us to do audiology and allowed us to do bridges. And so then we'll take stock of where we're at the end of the year and move forward. But I did want to let you guys know, and I'll update the board as well, that we did flip-flop central office. We pushed it back. So it's almost 2.5 years out now because we wanted to make sure that we got our students playgrounds. We got our students things they need in the buildings. One last push before we would do central office.
2 things, a question and a bonus statement. Question for partner district teachers, and I should know this, so sorry about that. Their supplies, their books, their curriculum, their textbooks, all that stuff. Is that come out of our money, or let's say they're in Kirkwood or Kirkwood's money because they're in their school? So who pays for our partner district teachers' textbooks?
We do. So
Okay.
our special education teachers who are in Kirkwood, we have their director budgets, what they're going to need for curriculum and supplies and everything else. And then that comes through us. We purchase that, and that becomes their supplies.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I'm just, because he's downstairs singing really loud, Bird is the Word song from the 50s, because my son, he would like Amazing Swings at New Warner. So if you could put in a special Tommy swing but yeah, write it down.
Tommy swing with a check mark.
But yeah, because pretty much there's always never a swing open because they're the most popular thing for these kids. Like the climbing stuff doesn't seem to be really their forte because that's balance and motor skills, but swinging, they could do that all day long.
Yeah, no, and that's that. Yes, we started talking and looking at playgrounds and started really thinking about what we can do. There are a couple companies out there that just do amazing playgrounds for students with IEPs, for students with disabilities, and we really would love to. We've done such a good job on our buildings and making our buildings look nice and everything else. Now we just need the playgrounds to go with it, and honestly, they're not cheap. It could be upwards of $500,000 to $750,000 a playground. So, and that's okay because we can plan for that. We just wanted to flip flop it so that we could get that going. We may not be able to get all schools this summer, but we can probably get at least 2 or 3, if not 4, and then do the second group the next fiscal year.
That makes sense, especially, and now don't tell them I'm saying this, but obviously do the little kids school, the grade schools first, and then the high schools would make the most sense, I think.
Except for one swing at New Orleans
Right.
that has a plaque on it, right? Yeah.
If you could, no favoritism though.
Right. None. It'll all be on me. It has nothing to do with you. So, did I answer both your questions, both your thoughts? Okay. Right.
Jeff, I got a quick question related to what Katie was just asking. Does the district allot funds for teachers to buy extra classroom resource materials, like beyond the textbooks that might be required for any kind of, any additional visual displays or anything for the classroom? Do we have a set amount per teacher that we reimburse?
Yeah, we have small ticket items that we can reimburse, but that's all through the budgets in the partner districts. So besides curriculum and besides that, they can work with their director to get what they need to do that. So especially in a co-taught history classroom in Parkway, we would encourage that quite a bit.
So that's only through their own in school administrators. They don't get a special allotment from us
through our directors, and so they do.
They
get, yeah, so that's through us. They get those, and then they can put that in and submit it through them.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. All right. And so as you can see, the last 2 years, the spending was, when you see that 442 million in FY20, that was at the end of the year where we were shut down for 3 months since the end of March. That's where travel stopped. It's where transportation stopped running buses, where things weren't purchased at the end of the year. And then you can see we got into last year where the first part of the year we were shut down. And so transportation wasn't running, things weren't going. That 459 does reflect that stipend in there. But you'll see that doesn't look like the 503 that we've predicted for this year. And so we knew there was a hiring freeze in this range here. And so that 112 does reflect that stipend. So if you're thinking, why is it 112 or 111 this year? That's because we put that extra money into that final and actual expenditures for last year. It was that extra payment. So as we go through and as we revisit the budget for this year and the budget for next, we will have a really good idea of where we're going to be in the next month or two coming up. We kind of stop spending, or we don't allow spending unless it's approved. So we'll know what supplies we're going to be buying. We know what that's going to entail. We know where our salaries are going to wrap up. And so as we get the revenue in through these final taxes, we'll be able to make some pretty good estimates of where we're going to fall. And I can update this committee and the board throughout the spring as we go. But coming up here in the next month or so, we should hopefully maybe even by that February 22nd board meeting, we could have some idea of where we're looking to wrap the year up. And so we know a lot of this is in the purchase services. A lot of this is in the salaries in this capital project. So we'll keep you up to date. This number will change. That 516 will change as we go. And then that's our focus on some, that's our Dispro, and then our partner districts. And this is into our staffing requests now. And so what we've done is we have met with each partner district, their director. They've provided a presentation to us as we've gone along. And now we're into the partner district meetings with their superintendents. And so while we have 12 teachers, 21 paras, 2 coordinators, and 2 SLPs, those numbers will change a little bit as we move on because we are looking at ratios. We're looking at, do these positions impact students? Do they impact caseloads? And so for the most part, when you see the 12 teachers, it's an average cost of $75,000. And I know you're going to say, well, you just said it, we hire them in at 52. But we have to take into consideration insurance, retirement, and other benefits as well. So the total package is about $75,000. Total package is about $45 per para. Coordinators are $135 and SLPs are $125. So that kind of gives you an idea of what's being requested from the partner districts. We added quite a few staff last year, which was great because we knew we were understaffed. And then you can see where that falls. So to the tune of about $2.3 million, the request right now, and again, like I said, that's tentatively approved, is to add those staff. And then that disproportionality, we're looking at adding 1 behavior specialist, 1 social worker, 2 teachers. And again, how that changes, we had a conversation today with another district where we may be adding 2 instructional coaches, just with their disproportionate money, so that they have an understanding of what they need to do with that. So disproportionality, we're looking to add a couple positions there. And then here are SSD requests. And some of these have changed as recent as this afternoon. So like the 3 teachers and the 5 paras, we have found ways to, one, reshuffle some staff or take a look at a different way of using what we have. And it doesn't increase caseload. It doesn't increase anything like that. It doesn't make people's lives harder. Otherwise we would add staff, but it's just, requests as we come along. So some of these we are expecting that these 3 students are going to go here, and it didn't happen. Or we were expecting to add a classroom here, and through enrollment or changes, it didn't take place. So we're looking to add a few social workers, an instructional coach, an OT, a couple one EPS, and then 4 people in the human resources, which we talked about last time. So that kind of shows you about 1.2 million there for special education requests. And on this slide, it's 58 new teachers for about $3.9 million, 5 staff reductions, and that's at our North Tech building through the reduction from full day to half days. And so I think 4 of the 5 have been placed somewhere else already. We're working on that 5th. But really, again, that 3.9 is not 3.9. I'd say it's probably closer to 3, just as we've gone through today and continue to have our budget meetings. So that number will continue to be reduced as we move forward. We'll bring you a really solid number on the 25th or on the 22nd so that you guys know what we're looking at. Any questions about staffing?
Have there been conversations about concerns over a potential mass exodus of teachers who have been kind of fatigued, chronically fatigued this year.
Yeah, that is something that we are always watching. We're monitoring. We get resignation and retirement reports sent to us a couple times a week. And so we're building a spreadsheet already that looks and sees where they're coming from and what's happening. So we're having those discussions right now. It's not a mass exodus like we were thinking. I understand it is so tough right now in our schools. It is just time consuming, and our teachers put in such energy, such emotion, and they do an amazing job. So that is one thing that we are looking at as the resignations and retirements come in. We're working with HR to make sure our positions are posted and see what we can do to make sure that we are absolutely ready to go as we move forward.
Thank you.
And then the question came up at the last board meeting for a fund balance request. We did end this past year. With a 74.52. That was where we were the prior year as well. And that's why we did that stipend. We knew we could finish there. We also knew we were going to increase salaries quite a bit to that 4% this year, 3.5% next year. So we wanted to see where that would fall. If projected per budget, so if we deficit spend like we had projected, that we would end this year at 66%. And we would have another decrease in FY23 for that fund balance. And that'd probably be in the neighborhood of 60% at the end of FY23. So that's if we deficit spend with what we expected to, and deficit spend with the reduction in revenue. We're not there yet to make too many predictions, but it just gives you some idea of what that looks like. If we were to match revenues and expenditures this year, we would be at 71% for a fund balance at the end of this current year, and then a fund balance of 66% if we just do a little increase at the end of next year. So there's a wide variance of where that could fall. That's something that we'll keep the board updated on as we go. But as we do go through this, depending on where we fall with expenditures, we will start to spend that down. The board has always wanted to maintain 6 months of operational expenditures in the fund balance. And so what that looks like, while we're in school, we spend about $45 million a month. And so that would be a little bit north of $240 million, closer to that $250 million range. We're currently at a fund balance of $330 million. So that shows you where we could be if we start spending it down to that range. Any questions on that, or any thoughts?
What did you, I was writing it down and I missed it, what you said, six months. If we had 6 months in a little bank vault, how much would that be? 250, did you say?
Yeah, I mean, depending on where we are. So like in the summer months, we spend anywhere between 15 and $20 million. And then we get into the year and we get upwards of 40 to 45. So if you just take $40 million times the 6 months, it'd be $240 million. So if you wanted to do that 45 million, it'd be a little bit more than that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So it kind of gives you some idea of where that 6 months falls of making sure we have the expenditures to cover that rate.
Perfect.
And then, I think everything kind of locked up on me here. There we go. Just want to make sure that's the last question. Yep. So that concludes the budget presentation. Do you guys have any questions that I could answer?
So Jeff,
All right.
what are the next steps after this?
So the next steps after this is we're going to continue to refine the budget requests. We're going to continue to refine the budget, and then we'll bring it to the board next week for just a workshop presentation. to let you guys ask questions and let you see kind of where we're at and see how we're progressing. And then on February 22nd, at that board meeting, we'll bring it to you for preliminary approval. What preliminary approval means isn't that that is the budget and it's set in motion. It just gives us the opportunity to go ahead and start working towards either some purchases that we know we're going to need to make or hiring so that we can, kind of like Scott, what you asked, we can ensure that we're getting the best candidates moving forward. And then after that preliminary approval, we'll continue to work on the budget throughout the spring. We'll continue to look at expenditures and revenues and keep the board updated. And then we'll bring it back to the board in May for final approval.
Great.
Thank
Is
you.
there- Go ahead.
I'm going to look at my crystal ball, and the question I had about that 6 months, I bet Dr. Cuneo will also have it. So you might want to make that its own bullet point.
Yes, it will be, is
Yeah.
absolutely.
Great. So I have swing, bullet points, and a crystal ball. This is what
There
I've
you go.
taken away from this.
Yep. Perfect.
I should have asked a quick follow-up on the amount of that can be reimbursed to each teacher. What do we allot to each teacher for that?
I do
For-
not know. I don't know off the top of my head, but I will get you that answer.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
So Director Mueller, is that in terms of how much teachers are allocated for materials and supplies?
Yes,
Got it.
yes.
Yep.
Yep. I will make sure that
Thank
you
you.
have that answer.
Thank you.
And I think, Jeff, we'll do what our existing teachers are, but let's also include new teachers too.
Yes. Yeah, because that was very cool. We allowed our new teachers to purchase items for their classroom this past fall so that they didn't, so that they had it, which is cool. So we'll make sure that we get you an answer on that. Any other information you guys can think of that you would want or that I may have missed so that the next board meeting goes well for your colleagues? All
I
right.
appreciate the reshuffling, the reprioritizing with the fourth year plan shifting to the fifth and
Mhm.
yeah, switching those. So yeah, I think that's the right message. It's the right thing for our parents and taxpayers. So thank you for that.
Yeah, including the playgrounds.
Yes.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
one of our
once-
goals, is to make sure we take care of all of our students in our schools first. So if we have to push other things off, we will do that.
Perfect. All right. I will make sure to get you an answer on that, and then we should be set. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate the feedback very much.
Thank you.
Glad we could be here.
Mhm.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks,
All right. Thank
everybody.
you guys.
Good evening. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Thanks, Amy.